Hi, I'm Amy Edwards, and welcome to the Edwards Table. This podcast is all about real conversations, the kind that come from life, love, family, friendship, and all the messy, beautiful parts in between. I started this show because I believe in redemption stories and in sitting down together to talk about the things that shape us, heal us, and sometimes just make us laugh. So grab a seat, take a breath, and join me, because there's always room for you here at the Edwards Table. Well, hey everyone, and welcome back to the Edwards Table. My name is Amy Edwards. I have the privilege of being the host here at the Edwards Table podcast. For any of you that are brand new to our table and pulling up a seat with us, super glad to have you here. And for those of you who've been on this journey with me, wow, so thankful for each of you. So just wanted to kind of touch base with you all and think about this month of February as I've been kind of talking through some different things this month. So for instance, the very first week of the month, we talked about trust. And if you're familiar with my story, there are a lot of reasons why I have had to learn how to trust not only in God and learn how to kind of take things away from what I believed about Him because of my story, because of things that have happened in my past. So I am a survivor of abuse on multiple facets and have had just my favorite word, if you've not listened in season 1, was wild, but I have a very wild story. And one day maybe we'll see a made-for-TV series for that one. So kind of kicked off this month talking about trust, what that looks like. And then last week touched on the healing part of my journey. And, that healing is a process. It's not an event, right? I'm learning that. The older I get, the more trips around the sun I take, the more I'm learning. Healing is a process. It is not an event. And so it takes time. So today what I want to talk about is in that healing journey, we get scars from those wounds that we are healing from. And kind of talking about what it looks like to have those scars, but then also having to balance that with going on with life. Like, you still have to love the people in and around your life, all the while of healing. And if you're like me, there's not like a how-to manual out there. I don't feel like that's really a conversation that most of us are having. Also, if you're like me, outside of starting this podcast, I typically, I talk a lot, but I don't share much. And what I mean by that is, in the past, I was chatty with people and things of that nature, but I wasn't really telling people things necessarily about me. Like, they really didn't know me as a person. So what this podcast is doing for me is allowing me the opportunity to actually talk a lot, but then also be able to actually share my journey, what I'm learning along the way. And let me reassure you, to any and all of you listening, I do not have all the answers. I do not know all of the things, but I'm thankful and grateful to be here to be able to share what I do know and then what I'm learning. Because some things even I thought I knew, I'm learning new things about myself in terms of this whole having scars, but then also loving people. So definitely want to jump into this conversation today and just chat more about what that looks like from my perspective, and given some different pieces of my story, and how I'm doing that, learning along the way, but then also even today, still living with those scars. So I know if you join me this month at all, I've kind of talked about having wounds. And I'm not talking like, I cut my leg on my razor after I tried shaving, maybe having let that go on a little too long before the next shave, but true wounds. And so I think about the fact that if I ever were to show you, I have, which I never will, so let's just all take a deep breath and praise God for that, but I have 3 incision scars on my lower abdomen. And so 2 of those are from having C-sections, and 1 of those is from having a hysterectomy. And the first time I had my first C-section was my first incision, obviously. And it was some of the most excruciating pain I have ever experienced. And so it took a really long time for it to heal. 1, because I was extremely overweight. And so just the wear and tear of my body and just extra skin hanging when you've had a baby, there's a lot of things that are flowing and gushy and not firm. And so this also was before they did like binding. So now, I don't know if they still do this, but they did it on my second pregnancy and on my hysterectomy, where they gave me, it almost looks like a wrap that I put around my back, and then would just kind of, it Velcroed together, around the abdomen, and it held everything together, which made healing much, 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 much better. Well, what was interesting was when I went and had my second child and they did a C-section, they used, as close as they could, they used the same incision line. And so what was interesting is my second surgery, much less painful, because the scar tissue, I don't know if y'all are familiar, but like scar tissue does not have a lot of nerves intertwined. Like there are nerves around the scar tissue, but like the actual scar tissue itself is just a nice heap of skin that has just come together and is joy-filled to not have to think or feel anymore. So my second C-section was way easier, way better to like heal from. I mean, don't be telling my OBGYN this, y'all. Not that he cares now, but I was up and doing laundry probably the second day I was home, running around, whatever else. First C-section, I could barely get my leg up high enough to get in and out of the bathtub. It was horrific. And then after I had my second C-section, that was our youngest, Maddie. Once I had her, the next year is when I had my hysterectomy. So that incision actually is longer than the C-section incisions. And what was interesting is, again, they try to reuse the same area, right? Because it helps with healing more quickly and not as much pain, and less scar tissue in terms of all over your abdomen. Makes sense. Well, when I had my hysterectomy, again, I got the binding, which was beautiful, but then also they took it and they, there were, I think, a couple of inches on either side of my other scars that they had to go further past. And so those were obviously a little bit more painful, but nothing like my very first. And so in thinking about today and kind of talking with you all about scars and also trying to love at the same time, it just really took me back to some events in my life, but then also thinking about it from a visual standpoint of my surgeries and like healing from those, but then also trying to function in life at the same time. It's just a lot going on. And I find that when we are in a healing space, when we're trying to heal from something, but we also have life going on, much of the time, if you're like me, you go into survival mode and you push the pain that you're trying to heal from down, or you jump in and do other things to cope with it versus balancing healing with then also loving people. And so when I think about my personal story, there are many opportunities to share what healing and loving look like intermittently. And so it was kind of hard for me to pick which piece of my story I really wanted to talk about today. But where I landed was when John and I, we owned a company years ago and built homes. And so we, this was in the early 2000s. And had a very, very successful company where we were at the time. And when the economy crash of 08-09 came along, it was a time in our lives where we were at a very pivotal moment before that all started to shake down. So I had, the kids at that time, just to kind of give you context, we were around the 10th year of our marriage. Okay, so they were 9 and 4. And I had kind of landed in a spot where John and I had grown apart in our relationship, where we were more like roommates and I was more like a live-in au pair, I guess. I mean, like with benefits. I'll let you fill in that blank. But, I'm taking care of children, taking care of the house, trying to take care of John. But it was very much, we were very much in a space of transactional relationship. In other words, like you go in, punch in the code, and then the dollars come out of the ATM. Well, it's very much that way in our marriage too, where it was, I'm taking care of your children, I'm taking care of your house, I'm taking care of everything outside of your job for the day. And so I want money. And then for John, it was, I'm providing you money, therefore I want you. And both of us were really just in a very, I'm trying to think of the word I want to use, apathetic place. And so we both had kind of figured out that where we were in our marriage was not where we wanted to stay. And for me personally, I had made the effort to, I found myself a job outside of being a mom. Had gone hotel. I had gone apartment hunting and found a place for me and the kids to live. I was finding an attorney, and I had every intention of going forward and getting a divorce. And so, as life would have it, I wound up having had planned this girls' trip with a friend of mine, and because I'm just super exciting as a human, it was a scrapbooking trip. I know, y'all calm down. I'm wild like that. But so I went away for the weekend, and I was sitting at a table with 3 other women, and then we were in a room of other women sitting at like 8-foot tables. There were 4 to a table, and just kind of sitting and listening. And I'm hearing these women talk about their marriages. And there was one woman who had been in an accident and lost the use of her legs. So she became a paraplegic and had to use a wheelchair to be able to move around. And then also found out she couldn't have children. There's another woman her husband was cheating on her, and she knew it. And she stayed because she was scared to death to walk away from her marriage for fear of, she's always been a housewife and she didn't know how to handle that with children and going out on her own. And so she stayed in a marriage that was a disaster. I mean, utter and absolute disaster. Another whose husband struggled with alcohol and drug addiction. And I'm like listening to all of these stories around the room and the ladies that were seated around me and what they were going through. And I'm just like, wait a minute. Like, your life is nowhere near where these women are. And so what I realized in the moment, right? So like, if you've been following me in my journey and kind of where I was at this point in my life, I did go to professional counseling, trying to get my wits about me from my childhood, from my past, from the current situation that I was trying to navigate with my family, extended family, and what that looked like. And then all the while feeling like my marriage was teetotally and absolutely falling apart, right? Well, what I found in that time of sitting there and listening and really and truly taking pause, because I didn't have, kids running around that needed me. I didn't have a husband running around needing me. I was completely by myself. And it allowed me the opportunity to truly step back and think about, what was it that had driven me to a place of wanting to divorce John? Like, why was I thinking that was the situation that I wanted to jump into. Like I wanted to go into becoming a single parent, and I wanted to take my children away from their father, and that I didn't want to work on my marriage. Because let me be honest, I didn't have anything from John that said you're in an unhealthy relationship in terms of he's not abusing you. He was not, addicted to drugs. He was not addicted to alcohol. He wasn't addicted to porn. He wasn't unfaithful to me. He literally was working 6.5 days a week and cranking out as much money as he could make and providing for his family the best way he knew how. And the harder he worked, the further I pushed and held him away from me, and punished him. And it dawned on me over that weekend that that's actually what I was doing. And so it took me realizing that in that time of healing, what I thought I was doing, right? Going to counseling, going to church, going to small group, doing all the things. But y'all, what I realized in that moment is I had closed off my heart. Like I had shut myself down to where John couldn't access me. He could access my services, if you will. That sounds terrible, but I mean, that's truly what it was. He could access my services. He could access me as a mother. He could access me as a housekeeper, as a chauffeur. And quite frankly, it was more like a prostitute. I mean, not trying to go all the way in there, but just it was a transactional relationship. And I realized that where I was going and listening to people talk to me about what my marriage should look like, how I should be as a wife, what I should be doing, I was listening to all the wrong voices. First and foremost, I was listening to myself. I am not a good person to go to when I am trying to heal. That's a terrible person to listen to as someone in the midst of all the mess. They're not your point of contact. They should not be your point of contact when you're trying to figure out how to heal, right? Second of all, in those times, I was listening to family and friends whose marriages were a disaster. And I do mean an absolute disastrous mess. Those are the people that I'm listening to. Those are the people that are pouring into me and telling me what I should think and how I should feel and the actions I should take. And what is remarkable is when we shut ourselves down, like I did, when I closed myself off from the source of my marriage, which is my husband, and I clearly was not listening to people God was placing in my life to teach me and to speak into me. I was listening to folks that had no business telling me how to go about this. It would be like me going to someone who's morbidly obese, who does not have healthy habits, who does not know how to take good care of their body, but that's going to be the person I'm going to go to teach me how to take good care of myself physically. That's asinine. That makes absolutely no sense. But that's what I had done. And why I had done it, what I realized over that weekend, it was crazy. It was like this light switch moment. But what I realized in that moment was I reverted back to what I knew in a really hard, messy time. And that was to survive, to protect myself. And how I did that was I shut down any access to my heart by the one person who should have full access, which was John. And I was very blinded in those months, maybe even a couple of years, because it was gradual, right? This was like a slow drip that fills up a sink. It wasn't just like I got mad one day and I'm getting a divorce kind of a thing. I mean, it took a very long time for this to kind of come to be. But it was what I was pouring and putting into myself, listening to, receiving from folks and taking as like truth, and then filtering my situation through that. And y'all, when I say that epiphany moment where just like the light bulb came on, two things that I realized was, one, there's a huge difference in guarding our heart and shutting our heart down, right? So like guarding is a form of protection, and that comes with wisdom. So if it even says that in scripture, right? It talks about the fact that we should guard our hearts and our minds. But how do we do that? Not through people. We don't do that through people. We do it through the word. We do it through God. We help ourselves in guarding ourselves by opening ourselves up to the Holy Spirit and allowing him to frame our thoughts, frame our hearts, frame our minds. Because without him doing those things for us, we rely on who? Ourselves, what the world tells us, even people who maybe love the Lord and they have all the good intentions, but quite frankly, they don't have all the facts because they're not living the situation with you. They're only hearing your side of what's going on or observing from the outside and seeing that maybe your marriage is messy or maybe your marriage is hurting, or maybe not even marriage. Let's take it to just you as a person. They can tell like you as a person, something is not the same or quite right or whatever. And so they speak to that piece, but they cannot at all speak to your whole person like God does. And so I think what I really learned, what a huge takeaway for me in this time was that if I am going to God first, if I am allowing his word to be what I look at first, and y'all, I say this all the time and don't take it any way because there are books coming from me too. But if we are going to people, even if they love Jesus, even if they speak really well, they go and you go to the women's conference, it's amazing and all the things, that's fabulous. However, if we're not going to the word first, if that's not our first point of contact when it comes to questions, frustrations, trying to heal, whatever it is, if we're not going to God's word first, and then using resources around us, albeit books, conferences, people, therapists, all of these things, those are resources, but those should never be our first point of contact. Our first point of contact should always be going to the word and going to God, talking to him and really leaning into that. And listen, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not because I'm some professional who has done this with excellence. Your girl here learning all of this along the way. And it's still something, literally, if you were sitting at my table yesterday talking with a very precious friend of mine, I literally was telling her, I still struggle with this. This is an ongoing process, right? That's what our lives are on this planet, is an ongoing process of God refining us and stretching us and growing us. And so, fortunately, I have learned along the way to look at my situation and to be able to filter it first through God and his word. And when I catch myself not doing it, it definitely sends up a flag in my head. And it's like, hey girl, no. You're getting all in your feels, you're getting all in your head, you're getting all in the places you shouldn't be. Let's go and let's take that to God first. Typically, it's going to be I'm jumping in the car, making a store run, turning my radio off and just having a combo, because otherwise I very quickly jump into a place where I go into protection mode and then I go also into comparison mode. And I don't know about you, but social media is the bane of my existence for that. Because somebody's always thinner, prettier, smarter, wiser, whatever they're all the they're everything, better, right? Wrong. It's social media. It's an edited video. It's an edited photo. It's an edited phrase. It's an edited paragraph. It's a well-chosen song to match what it is that they're doing. It is social media. It is not a human being. But it is so easy for me, y'all, to jump in there and shut myself off, hold people at bay, and then allow the world to just spew all of that into my face and my heart and my thoughts. And then what happens is I spiral into these really, really, really blue places these really sad spaces where I hurt. And when I get to those places, thankfully, after years of learning and praying and sharing with John and opening up to these tender spots that God hasn't healed yet because I haven't let him in to do so, what is so beautiful is that in these conversations that I have now with John, who knows me really well, right? He and I have been married over 29 years, and only by God's grace, obviously. I just shared with you I wanted to divorce him in year 10. But he knows me so well, and the way that I'll respond to him, or just kind of my overall countenance, right? Like facial expression, how my shoulders, my posture is. Like if I'm slumped and kind of forlorn and sad, he knows that there are days where I just, I'm thinking about something. And also pause. I do have, not to use bad words, but I do have RBF very strong. Like a very dear and former boss of mine, bless her, she was so patient with me because I was definitely the one she was constantly having to elbow and be like, fix your face, fix your face, fix your face. It's so much so that it got to be a joke, and she would message me in the middle of the meeting and be like, what you thinking? Which I knew meant get your smile on. Let's look like we're happy to be in this meeting and not like we're going to kill someone. So anyway, definitely an RBF kind of gal. And just thinking about, though, how John knows that about me. And I mean, y'all, literally this past week, not even a few days back, it hadn't even been a full week ago, have some life stuff going on, and I'm learning how to really feel what I am feeling. So very new to me, being a survivor of a lot of trauma. It's not normal for me to feel. It's normal for me to package up all of my things, all of my traumatic events, all of my feelings into these gorgeous Tiffany boxes. My favorite color of blue is Tiffany blue. And y'all, a white satin ribbon on that, you're not gonna tell me anything is prettier. But you pop that up on the shelf, and then you have all of these beautiful boxes to look at, but you don't have to get into the dirty and the ugly of what's in them. That's how I compartmentalize. That's how I function. And that's how most people don't realize that I have anything truly going on in my head or in my life. So life hit, been in my feels. And I had woken up last week, and I had things kind of running through my head. And so without going into great detail, because it's not quite there yet for me to share, but just some hard things that I'm having to learn and accept and navigate right now in life. And I knew that I was struggling that day, but John had gotten up really early. We both did, read our word, read the scripture, we read the Bible together. And by together, I mean like in the same room. He and reading it out loud, vice versa. I'm not doing that. Some people do. Yay for you. That's great. We don't do that, but we read the same things. So we have things to talk about, whatnot. He prayed for us real quick and just like out the door. So I got up and sat back down pretty quickly, opened up my phone because I'd read my Bible. So that was done. Didn't really have a lot planned for the day. And I like that. I like chaotic days. I like days that are super busy. And if you're like me, you might like that too, because it means then you don't have to think about things. So me personally, I love a chaotic day. It makes me feel like I've done stuff. You know what I'm saying? And I had my little Post-its out of all the things I wanted to do. But then I realized very quickly I just was not feeling it. It was like when I would look at one thing on my list, well, I could do that, but really I need to do this first. Well, if I do that first, then really I need to do these other things first. Well, if I do those things, then I'm not going to have enough time to do this. And then, if you've ever read the book, if you give a mouse a cookie, I'm that. I'm the mouse. I am the mouse. It's just one thing after another. So then I saw a notification come across my phone, and because I do social media for not only myself for the Edwards Table, but I also do it for our company that John and I own. I check it. Like if I see a notification come through, I'll check it, make sure if somebody's commented or whatever, I can reply back. And so I went on there, I saw a comment, so I responded, and then that turned into flicking on my phone, just flicking the phone, scroll, 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 scroll. Next thing I know, it is 2 hours later. I have literally not left my seat on my couch, and I literally have done nothing. I haven't created any content like I was going to for the day. I hadn't marked the first thing off of my list. I did none of it. I froze. And then starts this time where I will, if I get in my head, I will start fighting with myself about, here you go again, beating myself up. I'm really good at that. Beating myself up, I can get really good at that. And so John texted that he had finished up where he was. He was going to come by the house and then go another place. And so that meant lunch. So I got up, got lunch together, and put it down in front of us, and we started eating. He sometimes will turn TV on, like watch a little YouTube shorts, or he'll watch a YouTube video while he's eating lunch, just to kind of like have no brain activity for a little bit, give himself a break. And he asked me, "Are you okay? Because you don't look like you're okay." And when John will say things like that to me, it immediately makes me cry, because it's such a sweet and a tender thing that he does for me, knowing me and knowing what I need in the moment. And so I told him, I was going to be fine. I was going to go to the grocery and pick up groceries for the rest of the week and the weekend. He's like, "No, I want you to go with me." Now, y'all, I hadn't showered. I hadn't brushed my teeth, didn't have my contacts in, had my hair up in a messy bun. I probably didn't even have a bra on at this point. Was still in pajamas, which constitutes a t-shirt and a pair of leggings. And he was like, "No, I want you to go get dressed. We'll go to this job site together. You can take pictures for social media and have content, and then I'll take you to the grocery and we'll grocery shop together." And we went back and forth. I argued with him, and he was like, "I'm not taking no for an answer, you're going." So after 20 minutes of back and forth, he was like, "Aim, we've got to go. Go get ready. Just leave your hair up like it is. You look fine." I said, through my tears, I said, "Well, can I at least put my contacts in and brush my teeth?" And he was like, "Baby, you can do whatever you need to do to get ready. Just go get ready." So I did. And we left the house and we got in the truck and started driving. We have kind of to this one job site, we've got a good 30-40 minute kind of a jaunt. And the first probably 20 minutes of that ride, I was very quiet and just looking out the window. And John, he knows that when I'm that way, ideally, trying to make it a funny time is not ideal, because I don't love taking a moment where I'm feeling heavy inside and trying to make a joke out of it, is how I look at it. And he looks at it as I'm trying to lighten the mood. Okay. And so he was very thoughtful. He did not try to do that, which I was very thankful for, because I was not in the mood. And so eventually he gave me time, and I eventually started kind of chatting. He started chatting with me, and I was able to then open up to him and tell him, this is kind of what led me into my moments today of just getting stuck in the funky blue. And this is so new to me personally. This is not typical of my personality. And so part of it's physical, I'm 51, welcome to perimenopause. But then also part of it is that I've been in a really quiet season where I don't have chaos in my life. I don't have a ton going on in my life in terms of my work days are very calm. And even on what probably the average person would say is a really chaotic day, for me, it's not, because I'm very used to living in chaos. And so, or working, excuse me, not living, working in chaos. I do not live in chaos, let me assure you. I don't do drama. That is not an Edwards thing. But working in it, I love it. I'm really wild like that. Like if you went on my LinkedIn profile, it does say bringing calm to chaos as my tagline, because it's truly what I do and it's where I thrive. Also because of what I come from and what I have survived and what I thrive in. I don't like to stay in it. Like I'm really good jumping into it and then bringing it to a calm space. So we went through our day and it was so beautiful, but it really spoke to me about today, like getting on here and talking with you all, because I had this all, content planned for the month, and thinking about like, okay, so we went through that like horrific time in our marriage where it just felt horrid and we really both wanted to just leave it. And as God would have it, I went away for the weekend. John kept the kids for the weekend, and he really didn't work like he normally would. I mean, I'm sure he went and checked on houses, but it wasn't like a typical Saturday where he'd be gone most of the day and then half of a Sunday kind of a thing. He truly came and stayed at home and was with the kids. And when we came back together, I shared with him what I was realizing being gone that weekend, and y'all, he did the same with me. He in turn realized that what he needed from me, he realized, yes, he needs the intimacy in our marriage. It's important for him as a guy. That's very important. We need intimacy as women in a different facet. And what he realized was that was his only focus. Instead of it being us as his focus, it was one thing. And being able to relinquish that and say, Amy, if we were never intimate again, I would still be with you. I would never leave you over that, was just one more layer of burden that was taken off of me. Like, because with my past of my childhood and what I've overcome, there was still pieces of my heart that were still hurting from, being rejected, being abused, not being heard, not being seen, my feelings not being validated. Like all of those things as a little girl that I experienced and then very quickly stuffed down and just hid and held on to, and I didn't talk about, because every time I had talked as a young child, it came back and it bit me so hard, and I didn't want to hurt anymore. So I would just stuff it and stuff it and stuff it and stuff it. And from that scar that I had as a child, I realized there were still parts of that that were not scarred yet. They were still wounds. And so what happened in that moment of John and I coming back together that weekend and having the conversation we did over the course of a couple of months, it just utterly and absolutely transformed our marriage, because it allowed me to realize that I did not need to close myself off from him. What I needed to do was open myself up to him and let him in and let him see and let him hear how I was feeling and what was going on in my head and in my heart and why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And y'all, I'm going to tell you what, it did so many things for us at that moment, but then also in the past, these 20 years that we've carried it with us. So it helped us strengthen our marriage. It helped us strengthen our relationship with God. It helped us put God in the middle of our marriage again. It helped us to withstand the next year, which was 2008. And that went from us being multimillionaires to being in debt, millions and millions of dollars, losing our house, losing 2 cars, literally losing everything. And we were able to withstand going through that because of allowing ourselves the opportunity to open our hearts to one another. So I think about that time in my life. I think about how hard it was. I mean, it wasn't, please don't hear me say, it was like, taking a day trip to Starbucks and Target. It wasn't that kind of a vibe, albeit I don't do that, but just getting out of the house on your own, okay? Just going and doing something lovely. But like the work that was put in allowed for me to learn how to be in the mode of healing, right? But then to also allow myself to guard my heart. And by guarding my heart, I was able to read God's word and really pray through, and talk to God about it. Remember, prayer is not like this wildly formal thing where if you don't say this word or that phrase or what, cut that mess out. I don't know who taught you that. They taught me that too as a kid. That's ridiculous. It's a conversation. It is literally going to God and just talking to him like I'm talking to you. And being able to do that and just go right back to the Bible and be like, okay, God, this is what I'm feeling. Here's where I am. And I need your help. I need to understand. And so where God took me was, I say it's kind of ironic, but also not at all. So if you're in the Bible and you're in the New Testament starts with the Gospel of Matthew. Listen to me, good heavens. Matthew. So the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. That truly is Jesus' story about his life here on this earth. And then you go ahead into your Bible and the next, not sequentially in order, not every book is together who wrote it, but there are several letters to churches, and they were written by Paul. So, wild story about Paul. Before Paul was Paul, he was Saul. So let me tell you a little bit about Saul. Saul, back in his original days, he was a Jewish man. He was a religious Jew, and he worked his way, I would say, up to being a very highly respected Jew, okay? And there were groups of Jews during this time in the Bible that were very religious. They did all the things in terms of following the Jewish law, and anybody that would come and try to ask a question about a law or push against that, he was like first in line to cut you down. So much so that when Jesus was an adult and he was in his ministry, so from 30 to 33, Jesus was doing his ministry on earth. Paul was killing Christians. So he was so adamant that the law of the Jewish law was the Jewish law, and he absolutely was not buying into this whole Jesus is the Messiah business. And so he was staking Christians' heads on outside the town, murdering Christians, as many as he could get his hands on. And there is a story about him, and it's called his walk to Emmaus. So he literally is on a road walking to a place called Emmaus. And this is where he encounters God. And God blinds him for 3 days. He can't see. And God gives instructions on how to get his sight back, and he follows. And then very quickly, he's through this experience, right, he definitely becomes a believer. And what is so wild about that is from that point forward for the rest of his life, if you look it up, I don't have it in front of me, but if you look it up, he goes from being this rigid religious Jew to being an unapologetic, fearless follower of Christ. So much so that he endures getting flogged, beaten. I think they attempted to stone him, jail multiple times, and for some years. I didn't even say this. So he was a Roman citizen which like catapulted him above all of the Jews at the time, because Rome like was in charge of all the places at that time over there in the Middle East that we know it today. So like he was like the creme de la creme of society, if you will. And for him to step away from that and fall so deeply and madly in love with who Jesus was and what Jesus was trying to promote while he was here on the earth, and then carry forward through his disciples and apostles, which were Jesus followers, if you're not familiar. What Paul went on to endure was just, to me, unfathomable. Like, if you read about him in the Bible and you see just how much he endured and did and whatnot in his time, knowing full well that he truly was giving his literal life up for this, it speaks to me in multiple ways in terms of my story. So one is that me sharing my story transparently, I get so in my head about worrying over things that are so silly, like what people think and what people are going to say, and what I'm going to say. Am I going to say the wrong thing? I don't know, y'all. My head is just a jumbled mess when I get stuck in myself like that. And so there's that part that really resonates with me. I think about the burden that he also carried, knowing that he murdered so many fellow Christians. And not to say that he was, living in all of his head over that or whatnot, but just knowing that you have to balance the fact that you did indeed make those decisions and you did indeed choose to put people to death over what you now believe in, is just a unique situation to be in. And so I respect and admire his writings so much. When you read what he's written in his word, in the Bible, it just speaks so much to how humble he's become, how much he loves the Lord and wants everyone, not just the Jews but the Gentiles, to know. So if ever you read about him in the New Testament, you read any of his letters, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, it goes on and on and on, lots of books. These are all letters that he's writing to different churches. And what's unique about his ministry is when Jesus was on the earth and he was out speaking to people, he's speaking to Jewish people, typically. Now, not to say that there weren't non-Jewish people that were in the mix, but the masses of people in the temple, the Jewish temple, that's where he was speaking. On the hillside, he was bringing Jewish people together. Yes, there were outliers. But for Paul, what he realized quickly was he became a believer, and God needed him to go after the Gentile. And the Gentile was anyone who wasn't a Jew. So if you weren't born of Jewish culture and whatnot, then you were considered a Gentile of the day. And so that's really who he was going after. So I find that so fascinating. He was so wired and raised and grew into being this Jewish religious man, but yet when he accepted Christ and became a follower and a believer, God shaped and formed his heart to truly go after others, and not just the Jewish people, but to open that opportunity up for all, which is what why God sent Jesus to this earth, was not just for the Jew, but also for the Gentile, for every person on the planet, then and now. So kind of going back to what I started with today and just thinking about physically scars that I have endured, and then emotional scars that I have. The reality of scars is this: Scar tissue starts physically almost immediately after an injury or a surgery or whatnot, which is considered an injury. Our bodies view it as an injury, right? And it takes time. And while that's going on and our body is healing, we are still able to love other people and love them well. I think the beautiful part of being able to guard our heart in those situations is that if we're seeking God first and foremost in our day-to-day lives, right? We start with Him in our mornings, we end with Him in our evenings, and He really and truly is just in the mix of everything that we're doing. The beautiful thing that I have found that happens is, one, He meets me wherever I am. I just have to invite Him over. So it's kind of like, if you think about it, He is sitting in the room, but He's across the room until you go to Him or until you ask Him to come over. And so He never leaves. He's always with us. It's just a matter of us making the move toward Him. And some days that can be really hard. And some days that can be really easy. And some days it's just natural. But I think the beautiful part is that no matter what the situation, that God doesn't disqualify us because we are scarred. For heaven's sakes, He sent His own Son to this earth, right? Well, what happened to Jesus at the end of His 33rd year, or in the midst of His 33rd year? He was falsely accused, found guilty with no wrongdoing, and was sentenced to being flogged, crowned with a crown of thorns, and then crucifixion. And so He's the ultimate healer of scars and wounds that were stakes driven through His hands and His feet, a spear that pierced His side. And He knows, He's done it, He's experienced it. And it's one of the things that I'm always so in awe of God for, that He's so thoughtful and so kind and so generous to us as people, that He would send His Son to this planet, sinless, would never make a mistake, would never have reason to get into any sort of trouble, and was thrust into a world at the time that was wrought with just a mess. I mean, it was such a messy time in history. If you go back and read the history of what was going on at, the turn there, it was crazy, crazy messy. And, from how people were treated, the class system, but then also from a religious standpoint and what that looked like. I mean, it was wild. And it wasn't just, there in modern day, Israel, Palestine, kind of in those regions. But I mean, outside of that too, and what was going on. And the Roman Empire was insane, but then also how the Romans treated people, and that was insane. And so there was a lot of messiness. And yet, God chose that time to send Jesus to the earth to live with us and experience life like us. He was raised by a mom and a dad who were not noble in terms of their standard of their station and where they fell in the birth order of ranking and things of that nature. His father was a carpenter, and so he had brothers and sisters. He lived in Nazareth. It was not a fancy pants place. And yet he endured all of that, and his being flogged and beaten and crowned with thorns and hung on a cross to die. So he is the ultimate understander of what all of us go through in terms of our pain and in terms of our healing. And what is so gorgeous is that no matter where we are in our journey, he meets us there as long as we invite him in. And I just think that's so pretty. Like, in such a gross, nasty situation of healing from abuse, that is such a gorgeous picture of our God, who is, himself got just totally and completely disfigured. Like, people couldn't even recognize him. And they stripped him naked. I mean, like, I don't know. I could go on for days and just in awe of the fact that he did that for me. Like, for Amy Edwards, he did it for me. And he did it for you. Knowing where you come from, where you are, where you're headed, knowing your future, knowing your past, knowing you before you were even born. And it's so beautiful to me. So if you're on this journey with me and you are trying to figure out how to balance healing with also loving people, what I can tell you that I know, and my takeaways are these. One is that God meets us no matter where we are. So if we're in the midst of healing, he can totally handle our hot, messy selves. One of his disciples, Peter, mouth that could stop a freight train, and then also denied Christ not once, not twice, but 3 times when he got arrested. So, like, y'all, he can handle us. 2 is that we have a responsibility to guard our hearts, meaning that we're protecting our hearts. But we absolutely have a responsibility not to close our hearts, because what comes from that is the people who we do care about, who we do love, who we are responsible to either take care of or love or be part of their lives with. When we shut our hearts and close it down, that is an act of fear. That is not wisdom. And when we do those things, it causes so much that messy that we're going to then have to go back and ask for forgiveness for and clean up. And so definitely want to learn how to guard our hearts by leaning into Christ, by leaning into the Bible, by praying, and by surrounding ourselves with people who are healthy, who are similar to who we are in terms of, like, for me, it's important for me to have people who believe in our Christ followers. But also to look at their life. Like, what is it about their life that shows me they're a good person to pour into me? It's their actions. It's the people around them. In Christianese, we call that fruits of the Spirit. So things that are an outpouring of our hearts are our actions, right? So that's what we talk about when we say fruits of the Spirit. And then the third thing is allowing people to see your needs when you're in this process. And quite frankly, you're going to be in this process, if I'm guessing. All of us are kind of in the process our whole lives. Not to say the same spot in the process, but I do think that because of how life works, depending on how many years you've been on the planet and what you've endured, there are processes to be able to heal. And then if you're in the process of healing and then actually have to go through another traumatic event, it's a whole nother layer that you're now having added to your process, if you will. So, like, just like with forgiving, just like with healing, loving is the same way. It's a process of learning how to be able to love someone at the same time as you are also healing. And I think what's beautiful about that is that you have your scars, and eventually one day those scars, because they do fully heal, they're no longer painful. They're no longer hard to have. They still may not look beautiful, because I'm gonna tell y'all, if you were to look at my stomach, ain't nothing beautiful about that. However, the beautiful part about said scar is I get to be here and I get to be able to share my story so that prayerfully it helps you on your journey. And that is what is gorgeous about this whole healing process. This whole bit about having scars is they don't have to stay painful forever. But while they are, and while you're healing, God can meet you there. He's never gonna walk away from you. You have the power to walk to him just as much as you have the power to walk away from him. So as we kind of wrap up for today, here are a couple of things I want you to think about that have been on my mind lately. First of all, where do you notice your scars showing up? I shared a little bit about mine, but think about yours. Where do you see your scars showing up? And then the second thing I would ask you is this: are you guarding your heart or are you closing it? And now that you think about those things, how about this? What would happen if you allowed God to start loving you in those tender spots? We all thank you so much for joining me again this week. It is always a pleasure and a privilege to have you here. And be sure to tune in next week, our last week of this February series, where we talk about trusting God with no safety net. Remember, I'm a girl who's never been on a roller coaster, and I can guarantee you've never jumped out of planes. We definitely need to have this convo. So be sure you join us. And in the meantime, remember, no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're scarred and you're healing, or you're wounded and you're trying to figure this life out, or you're loving someone who is a hot mess and you're just trying to show up for them, there is always a seat for you here at this Edwards table. And I'm so glad that you're here. Till next time, I'll see you soon. Bye, y'all.